The morning light filtered through my bedroom curtains as my fingers reached for the familiar weight of gold on my nightstand. Every day for the past 5 years, touching Miguel's wedding ring had been my first conscious act, a ritual that bridged the gap between sleep and waking, between the world where he still existed in dreams and the harsh reality where he didn't. My hand found only empty space. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The absence hit me like ice water in my veins. I sat up, suddenly, completely awake, my heart hammering against my ribs. The small ceramic dish where I placed the ring each night sat there, accusingly empty, except for a few coins and my car keys. No! 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 I whispered, my voice cracking in the morning silence. I threw back the covers, my feet hitting the cold hardwood floor as I searched frantically around the nightstand. Maybe it had rolled off. Maybe I'd knocked it over in my sleep. The ring was wide, substantial, 14-karat gold with tiny diamonds forming infinity symbols around the band. Miguel had saved for months to buy it, presenting it to me on our first anniversary with that crooked smile that made my knees weak. It had to be here somewhere. I dropped to my hands and knees, running my palms across every inch of floor, checking under the bed, behind furniture, in the folds of sheets I'd already stripped and shaken out 3 times. The bedroom looked like a hurricane had torn through it, drawers pulled out, their contents scattered, my jewelry box emptied and examined piece by piece. Nothing. The panic began to build, a familiar, crushing weight in my chest that I hadn't felt since those first months after Miguel's funeral. My breathing became shallow, rapid. 5 years since the accident, and I could still be reduced to this, a woman falling apart over a piece of metal. But it wasn't just metal. It was the last thing he'd touched, the last gift he'd given me, worn on his finger during our final kiss goodbye that Tuesday morning when he'd left for work and never came home. "Think, Amelia," I said aloud, forcing myself to breathe slowly. "When did you last see it?" "Last night." I remembered placing it carefully in the dish, the same motion I'd performed 1,825 times since Miguel died. I never forgot. Never! The sound of my front door opening made me freeze. Only one person had a spare key. "Amelia, you home, sis?" Serena's voice carried through the house, bright and cheerful in a way that immediately set my teeth on edge. My younger sister had a gift for appearing at the worst possible moments, usually when she needed something. "In here," I called, hastily shoving clothes back into drawers, trying to make the bedroom look less like a crime scene. Serena appeared in the doorway, her dark hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, wearing designer jeans that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. At 30, she still carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never face real consequences. Dad's little princess, even now, 3 years after his death. "What happened here?" she asked, eyeing the disheveled room. "Did you have a break-in or something?" "I can't find my ring." The words came out strained, barely controlled. "Ring?" Serena's brow furrowed with what looked like genuine concern. "Your wedding ring?" I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. "Oh, honey." She stepped into the room, careful to avoid the scattered items on the floor. "I'm sure it's just misplaced. You probably took it off to do dishes or something and forgot where you put it." "I never take it off." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Never, Serena. You know that." Something flickered across her face, too quick to catch, but it made my stomach clench with unease. "Right, of course. Sorry." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. "Want me to help you look? 4 eyes are better than 2. I wanted to say yes. I wanted my sister to help me tear apart every room in this house until we found the one thing that kept Miguel's memory alive. But something about her presence felt wrong. The timing of her visit, the forced brightness in her voice, the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "When did you get here?" I asked. "Just now. I brought coffee." She held up a cardboard carrier with 2 cups.
That new place downtown you mentioned? Figured we could catch up. Serena never brought coffee. Serena never visited unannounced, unless she needed money, a place to crash, or someone to clean up whatever mess she'd made this time. In the past year alone, I'd bailed her out of 2 gambling debts and covered her rent when she'd spent her paycheck on a weekend in Vegas.
I need to keep looking, I said, turning back to my search. Come on, Amelia, take a break. The ring isn't going anywhere, and you're making yourself crazy. The ring isn't going anywhere. The phrase stuck in my mind, oddly phrased. How did she know the ring wasn't going anywhere? How did she know it wasn't already gone? I watched her from the corner of my eye as she set the coffee on my dresser, her movements casual, but somehow rehearsed. She was being too careful, too considerate. This wasn't the Serena who typically barged into my life demanding attention and solutions to her problems. Serena, I said slowly, did you come by yesterday or last night? No, the answer came too quickly. Why would I? I had that date with the guy from the gym, remember? I told you about him. Had she told me? The past few days blurred together in my memory, but I couldn't recall any mention of a date. Then again, I'd been distracted by work, by the approaching anniversary of Miguel's death next month, by the familiar weight of grief that always intensified as autumn approached. Right, I said, not wanting to start an argument, not yet. But doubt had taken root, growing like a weed in the garden of my trust. Serena had always been impulsive, always been drawn to quick solutions to her problems. And she knew what the ring meant to me. She knew it was the one thing in this house I treasured above everything else. She also knew I'd never sell it, never pawn it, never let it go willingly. Drink your coffee before it gets cold, she said, settling onto my bed with her own cup. Tell me about work. How's the new position treating you? I stared at her, this woman who shared my face, my childhood, my father's eyes, but none of his integrity. The sister I'd spent my whole life protecting, covering for, enabling. The sister who smiled at me now while something cold and guilty lurked behind her expression. The ring was gone, and Serena was here, bright and chatty, and wrong in every way that mattered. I picked up the coffee she'd brought, inhaling the rich aroma, but I couldn't taste it past the bitter certainty growing in my throat. My sister was lying to me about something, and in a house where only she and I have keys, where nothing else is missing, where my most precious possession had vanished overnight, that something felt like betrayal sharp enough to cut. The coffee had gone cold in my hands as I watched Serena chatter about her job at the boutique, her new apartment, anything except the growing silence between us. She filled the air with words the way she'd always done when she was nervous, a habit that used to charm our father, but now grated against my raw nerves like sandpaper. Serena, I said, interrupting, setting down the untouched cup, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Her stream of words dried up instantly. Of course, what is it? Are you absolutely certain you didn't come by yesterday or last night? I kept my voice level, reasonable. Even if it was just for a few minutes, maybe you forgot something or... Amelia, I told you. I was out with Derek until late, then went straight home. Her tone had shifted, defensive edges creeping in. Why are you interrogating me like I'm a criminal? I'm not interrogating you. I'm trying to figure out how my wedding ring disappeared from a locked house where only you and I have keys. The words hung in the air between us like a lit fuse. Serena's face flushed, her dark eyes flashing with the same wounded anger I'd seen countless times growing up. Every time anyone dared suggest she might be responsible for something that had gone wrong. So that's it. She stood up, pacing to the window. Something goes missing and your first thought is to blame me? God, Amelia, nothing's changed, has it? Still the same old assumptions. I'm not assuming anything. I'm asking a question. No, you're accusing me. You think I stole your ring, just like you always think the worst of me, just like Dad. Don't. The word came out harder than I'd intended. Don't bring him into this. Why not? He's the one who taught you to see me as the screw-up, the disappointment. Poor Serena can't be trusted with anything important. Better let responsible Amelia handle it. The familiar pattern was already emerging, the same script we'd played out a dozen times before. Serena deflected blame by attacking me, making herself the victim, until I backed down and apologized for daring to question her. But this time felt different. This time, something precious, irreplaceable was at stake. This is not about Dad's favoritism or our childhood dynamics, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. This is about my husband's wedding ring disappearing from my bedroom.
And you immediately assume I took it? Tears sparked in her eyes, perfectly timed. Do you know how that makes me feel? That my own sister thinks I'm capable of stealing something so important to her? The tears were real. Serena had always been able to cry on command, a skill that had gotten her out of trouble more times than I could count. But behind them, I caught something else, a flicker of calculation, of someone working too hard to sell their innocence. I don't want to think that, I said quietly. But Serena, you've been having money problems again. You mentioned last month that you owed someone. I handled that. She wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara. I got an advance on my pay, paid off the loan. Everything's fine. Is it? Because you've been stressed lately, and you know the ring is valuable. Valuable? Her voice climbed an octave. Jesus Christ, Amelia, you think I'd steal from you for money from my own sister? You've borrowed money from me plenty of times. Borrowed, not stolen. There's a difference. Was there, though? I thought of all the loans I'd given her over the years that had never been repaid. The credit card bills I'd covered, the rent payments, the gambling debts. Money given freely because she was family, because Dad had always made it clear that taking care of Serena was my responsibility. I know there is, I said, but the ring is gone and I need to understand how. Serena collapsed back onto the bed, her head in her hands. I can't believe we're having this conversation. My sister's ring goes missing, and instead of comforting her, instead of helping her look for it, I have to defend myself against theft accusations. The performance was flawless. Wounded sister, betrayed by the one person who should trust her. If I hadn't seen it so many times before, I might have bought it. Might have rushed to apologize, to comfort her, to pretend my suspicions were unfair and cruel. But Miguel's ring was still missing, and Serena still hadn't looked me in the eye once during this entire conversation. I'm sorry, I said finally. You're right, I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions. The relief on her face was immediate and revealing. Too immediate. It's okay, sis. I understand you're upset. Grief makes us paranoid sometimes. She reached over and squeezed my hand. We'll find it. Maybe it rolled under something, or fell behind furniture. Wedding rings have a way of turning up in the most unexpected places. Her touch felt cold, wrong, like shaking hands with a stranger wearing my sister's face. Maybe, I agreed, pulling my hand away. I should probably keep looking. Want me to help? We could search room by room, really systematically. No. I stood up, suddenly needing distance from her false concern. Thanks, but I think I need to do this myself. Something shifted in her expression, disappointment maybe, or frustration that her offer to help had been refused. Why would she be disappointed unless she knew the search would be fruitless? Okay, but call me if you need anything, all right? I'm here for you. She gathered her purse, pausing at the bedroom door. And, Amelia, try not to torture yourself over this. Things have a way of working out. After she left, I sat in the silence of my ravaged bedroom, her words echoing in my mind. Things have a way of working out. As if the disappearance of my most treasured possession was just some minor inconvenience that would resolve itself. I walked to the window and watched her drive away in her convertible, a car she couldn't afford on her boutique salary, but somehow managed to keep. Like the designer clothes, the expensive dinners, the weekend trips that should have been beyond her means. My phone buzzed with a text from her. Sorry about earlier. Know you're stressed. Let me know when you find it. XOX. When? Not if. As if she knew with certainty that the ring would eventually surface. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, seeing my own haunted reflection in the black glass. The sister I'd spent my life protecting had looked me in the eye and lied, had turned my reasonable questions into attacks, my concern into paranoia. But why? What could drive someone to steal from their own family, to violate the sanctity of grief and memory? The answer sat in my chest like a lead weight, too terrible to fully acknowledge, but too obvious to ignore. Serena had always been impulsive, always been desperate for quick fixes to her problems, and she'd always known that I would forgive her, cover for her, enable her. This time might be different. This time, she might have crossed a line that forgiveness couldn't bridge. But first, I needed proof, because accusing my sister of theft was one thing. Being right about it was something else entirely. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my hand unconsciously reaching for the empty spot on my nightstand where Miguel's ring should have been. Each time my fingers found nothing, the loss hit me fresh. Not just the missing ring, but him, all over again. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I closed my eyes and let myself drift back to our wedding day, 7 years ago. Miguel had been so nervous during the ceremony that his hands shook when he tried to slide the ring onto my finger. I'd steadied him with a smile, whispering that we had all the time in the world. The photographer had caught that moment, his trembling fingers, my gentle touch, both of us laughing at his nerves. "This ring is my promise to you," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion, "that no matter what happens, no matter how far apart we might be, you'll always carry a piece of my heart with you." How prophetic those words had become. After the accident, when the doctors handed me his personal effects in a plastic hospital bag, his ring had been the only thing undamaged. His wallet was torn, his watch shattered, his clothes cut away by paramedics. But the ring, our ring, was perfect, unmarked, as if it had been protected by some divine intervention for the sole purpose of coming back to me. I'd worn it on a chain around my neck for the first year, the weight of it against my heart a constant reminder that death couldn't sever what we'd built together. Eventually, I'd moved it to the nightstand, creating a ritual of touching it each morning and evening, a prayer without words, a way of keeping Miguel present in my daily life. The ring wasn't just jewelry. It was my last physical connection to the man who'd promised to love me forever, who'd kept that promise even when forever was cut catastrophically short. It was the symbol of every shared dream, every inside joke, every quiet Sunday morning when he'd bring me coffee in bed and we'd read the paper together in comfortable silence. Now it is gone, and with it a piece of my soul I couldn't afford to lose. I sat up, switching on the bedside lamp, and pulled Miguel's photo from the drawer. In the picture, he was laughing at something I'd said while hiking in the mountains during our honeymoon. His dark hair was tousled by the wind, his brown eyes crinkled with joy, the ring clearly visible on his left hand as he gestured animatedly at the camera. "I'm sorry," I whispered to his image. "I'm so sorry I let someone take this from us." Because that's what this felt like, not just theft, but violation. Someone had entered our sacred space and stolen the last tangible piece of our marriage. They'd reduced a symbol of eternal love to cash value, transformed something precious into something disposable. The worst part was knowing who that someone likely was. Serena had always been jealous of what Miguel and I shared. She'd made little cutting comments during our engagement. How we were too serious for such a young couple, how marriage was just a piece of paper anyway. At the wedding, she'd gotten drunk and made a toast about how she hoped I wouldn't become one of those boring married women who disappears into her husband. When Miguel died, her jealousy had morphed into something uglier. She'd criticized my grief, suggesting I was wallowing or using widowhood as an excuse to avoid living.
When I kept his picture on my desk, she'd asked if it was healthy to shrinize the dead. When I mentioned him in conversation, she'd changed the subject with obvious discomfort. "You can't mourn forever, Amelia," she'd said last Christmas, 3 years after the accident. "Miguel wouldn't want you to waste your life being sad." As if she knew what Miguel would want. As if my grief was an inconvenience to her, rather than a natural response to losing the person who defined my happiness. I'd always attributed her comments to discomfort with death, or maybe concern for my well-being. Now I wondered if they'd been something else entirely. Resentment that, even in death, Miguel commanded more of my love and loyalty than she did. The thought made me sick, but it explained so much. The timing of her visit this morning, her overbright cheerfulness, her immediate defensiveness when questioned, her certainty that the ring would turn up. It also explained the pawn shop receipt. I'd found it while hanging up her jacket, the desire coat she'd carelessly thrown over my chair before leaving. The receipt had fallen from the pocket, a small slip of paper that might have meant nothing if my suspicions hadn't already been aroused. Martinez, Pawn, and Jewelry. Yesterday's date, no items listed, just a consultation fee for appraisal services. A consultation that took place the day before my wedding ring disappeared. My hands shook as I studied the receipt under the lamplight. Serena had gone to a pawn shop for an appraisal 24 hours before my wedding ring vanished. She'd lied.
Whereabouts, lied about seeing me, lied about everything, while looking me straight in the eye and feigning sisterly concern. But why hadn't the ring been pawned yet? Why the consultation fee instead of a sale? The answer came to me like ice water in my veins. Because pawning stolen jewelry required identification, documentation, waiting periods. Because Martina's pawn was reputable, careful, the kind of place that asked questions and kept records. They'd want proof of ownership for a ring as valuable as Miguel's. They'd want to make sure it wasn't stolen. Smart of them. Lucky for me. Which meant the ring was still out there somewhere, still recoverable, still salvageable from this betrayal. I pressed Miguel's photograph to my chest, feeling my heart beat against the glass. "I'm going to get it back," I promised him. "I'm going to find the truth, even if it destroys what's left of my family, even if it means watching my sister face the consequences of what she's done." The promise felt like a vow, sacred and binding. For too many years, I'd been the responsible sister, the peacekeeper, the one who cleaned up Serena's messes and absorbed her betrayals in the name of family harmony. I'd enabled her recklessness, funded her mistakes, forgiven her failures. But this was different. This wasn't money or pride or sibling rivalry. This was Miguel. This was love. This was the sanctity of memory itself. And some betrayals were too profound for forgiveness. I reached for my laptop, my fingers moving with new purpose. If Serena thought she could steal my husband's ring and lie to my face about it, she was about to learn that grief had taught me something she'd never expected. It has taught me that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And some people, even family, don't deserve protection from the consequences of their choices. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered, and I was going to find it, even if it shattered everything I thought I knew about the sister I'd spent my life defending. Some truths are worth the destruction they leave in their wake. Miguel's memory was one of them. My marriage, my love, my wedding ring, they were all worth fighting for, even against my own blood. The next morning, I stood in my kitchen holding Serena's designer jacket, the pawn shop receipt burning in my palm like evidence of a crime I wasn't ready to prosecute. The fabric smelled like her expensive perfume, something French with notes of jasmine that she couldn't afford but somehow always wore. Everything about my sister's life was like that, a beautiful facade built on borrowed money and other people's generosity. My generosity, mostly. I smoothed the receipt flat on my counter, studying every detail. Martinez Pawn and Jewelry, 1247 Elm Street. Yesterday, 2:47 p.m. Consultation fee,
$25. No item description, just a timestamp that placed Serena at a pawn shop exactly 18 hours before I discovered my ring was missing. The coincidence was too neat, too convenient. But was it evidence, or was I grasping at straws because I needed someone to blame for this loss? I Googled the address. Martina's Pawn had excellent reviews, a family business that prided itself on ethical practices and thorough documentation. They specialized in jewelry and precious metals, with a particular reputation for accurate appraisals. Exactly the kind of place someone would go if they had a valuable item they needed to understand before selling. My phone buzzed with a text from Serena. Still looking for the ring? Maybe check your car. Sometimes jewelry falls between the seats. The suggestion was practical, considerate. It was also completely wrong. I never wore the ring in my car, never took it anywhere except to and from the nightstand. Serena knew this. I had explained my daily ritual to her dozens of times, how touching Miguel's ring was my first conscious act each morning and my last each night. Unless she was suggesting I search my car because she knew I wouldn't find it there. Unless she was trying to send me on a wild goose chase while she figured out what to do with the ring she had taken. I typed back, "Good idea. We'll check there." Her response came immediately. "Great. Also, maybe the bathroom counter? You know how absent-minded you get when you're upset?"
Necklaces and electronic equipment. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged Hispanic man with kind eyes and graying temples. "Can I help you?" "I hope so." I pulled out my phone, showing him a photo of Miguel wearing his wedding ring. "Someone may have brought this ring in yesterday for an appraisal. I'm trying to trace it." His expression shifted to professional concern. "Are we talking about a stolen item?" "I'm not sure yet. The ring belongs to me. It was my late husband's. It went missing from my home, and I found evidence that someone took it to a pawn shop yesterday." He nodded slowly. "May I see some identification? And do you have any documentation proving ownership?" I handed him my driver's license and pulled up another photo on my phone, our wedding picture, both of us wearing matching rings, the timestamp showing the date 7 years ago. "Give me a moment." He disappeared into a back room, returning with a ledger and a concerned frown. "A woman came in yesterday afternoon with a ring matching that description. Mid-20s, dark hair, expensive clothes. She wanted to know its value." My stomach dropped. "Did she try to sell it?" "No, that's the thing. When I quoted the appraisal, $3,200 retail value, she got agitated, started asking about what paperwork would be required for a sale, how long the waiting period was, whether we reported purchases to the police. When I explained our procedures, she left without completing any transaction." "What procedures?" "Standard anti-theft protocols, photo ID, proof of ownership, 15-day waiting period for resale. We also report all transactions over $500 to local law enforcement. Been doing business here for 23 years. We don't take chances with stolen goods." Relief flooded through me so suddenly I had to grip the counter for support. The ring hadn't been sold. It was still out there, still recoverable. "The woman who brought it in," I said carefully, "did she seem nervous? Like she wasn't sure she wanted to go through with the sale?" "Definitely nervous. Kept checking her phone, looking over her shoulder, asked a lot of questions about our security cameras, whether we kept video records." He leaned forward conspiratorially. "Between you and me, she had all the hallmarks of someone trying to fence something that didn't belong to her." The words hit me like a physical blow. Fence something that didn't belong to her. My sister, the woman I'd protected, defended, enabled for 30 years, had tried to sell my husband's wedding ring and been scared off by the shop's legitimate business practices. "If she comes back," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "could you call me? I'll give you my number." "Absolutely. And ma'am, I'm sorry for your loss. Losing a spouse is hard enough without having to worry about theft on top of it." I thanked him and walked back to my car, my legs shaky with adrenaline and heartbreak. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Serena had my ring, she tried to sell it. The only reason she hadn't succeeded was Martina's Pawn's ethical business practices and her own guilty conscience. But why take it in the first place?
What desperation had driven her to violate the sanctity of my grief, to steal the one thing she knew would destroy me? The answer came as I drove home, passing the casino where she'd racked up her gambling debts last year. Serena lived paycheck to paycheck despite her boutique job, constantly borrowing money from me for rent, car payments, the designer lifestyle she couldn't afford. She was always one financial crisis away from disaster, always looking for quick solutions to long-term problems. $3,200 would solve a lot of immediate problems. Enough to pay off creditors, catch up on bills, buy her time to figure out a more permanent solution. And she probably told herself she'd replace the ring eventually, that I'd never have to know, that it was just a temporary loan from a sister who had always bailed her out before. Except this time, she'd miscalculated. This time, she'd taken something irreplaceable and assumed I'd never notice, never investigate, never fight back. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Serena's name on the display. "Hey sis, any luck with the ring?" "Still looking." I kept my voice neutral, even though I wanted to scream at her. These things take time. "I've been thinking about it all day. You know what? I bet it's in your purse somewhere. You probably took it off to put on lotion or something and dropped it in automatically."
She was still trying to misdirect me, still feeding me false hope, while she figured out what to do with the evidence of her betrayal. The manipulation in her voice, so smooth, so practiced, made me wonder how many times she'd lied to me over the years, how many stories I'd believed, how many alibis I'd accepted without question. "Maybe," I said. "I'll check there next." "Good. And, Amelia, try not to stress too much. I have a really good feeling about this. I think everything's going to work out just fine." After she hung up, I sat in my car staring at my house, the sanctuary where Miguel and I had built our life together, where his memory lived in every room, where my sister had violated the most sacred trust imaginable. Everything is going to work out just fine. As if she knew something I didn't, as if she had plans for making the situation resolve itself in her favor. But she'd underestimated me. For too long, I'd been the grieving widow, the responsible sister, the woman who absorbed everyone else's problems without fighting back. She'd counted on my passivity, my loyalty, my unwillingness to believe the worst about family. This time, she was wrong. This time, I was going to fight for what mattered most. Miguel's ring was still out there, and I was going to find it, even if it meant destroying the sister I'd spent my life protecting. The next morning brought another text from Serena. "Checked with Derek. He says sometimes jewelry gets caught in couch cushions. Worth a look." Derek, the supposed date from 2 nights ago that had given her an alibi for the evening my ring disappeared. I stared at the message, noting how quickly she'd deflected to her boyfriend when I needed actual help searching Miguel's ring. Almost as if she was working to keep me distracted, busy with futile searches while she handled some other pressing business. I drove back to Martina's pawn, this time with a clearer purpose. The owner, whose name I'd learned was Carlos Martinez, looked up from polishing a vintage watch when I entered. "Any word from the woman who brought in the ring?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nothing yet. But I've been thinking about your situation." He gestured for me to approach the counter. The woman seemed very concerned about our reporting procedures, kept asking if we had to notify anyone about appraisals, whether there was any way to handle things discreetly. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that appraisals are confidential, but sales require full documentation." She asked specifically about wedding rings, whether they needed special certification, if we required marriage licenses or death certificates for widow sales. Death certificates? She asked if widows selling their spouse's jewelry needed to prove the spouse was deceased, said she was asking for a friend. Carlos's expression darkened. In 23 years of business, I've never had someone ask that question unless they were planning to impersonate a widow. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Serena hadn't just stolen my ring. She'd researched how to sell it by pretending to be me. She'd planned to walk into another pawn shop, claiming to be Amelia Cruz, the grieving widow, selling her late husband's ring to pay bills or move on with her life. Did she ask about other pawn shops? Ones that might be less careful about documentation? Carlos nodded grimly, asked if I could recommend somewhere with a more streamlined process. I told her any legitimate business would have the same requirements. He paused. But there are places in the city that aren't so careful about paperwork, if you know what I mean. Illegal operations? Gray market. Cash only, no questions asked, no reporting to authorities. They pay maybe 60% of retail value, but they'll take anything without documentation. My heart sank. While I'd been searching couch cushions and car seats like an obedient sister, Serena had been researching illegal pawn operations. She was probably planning to drive to the worst part of the city and sell Miguel's ring to criminals who wouldn't care about proof of ownership. How would someone find places like that? Internet, mostly, or word of mouth in certain circles. Carlos studied my face. Ma'am, if your sister is involved with people who run illegal pawn operations, you might want to consider calling the police. This isn't just about theft anymore. It's about her getting mixed up with dangerous people. The police. The thought had been lurking in the back of my mind, but hearing Carlos say it made the situation feel suddenly terrifyingly real. If I called the police, there would be no more protecting Serena, no more cleaning up her messes in private. It would mean choosing justice over family loyalty, truth over the fiction we'd all maintained about her being the charming screw-up who just needed more chances.
Let me ask you something, I said. If someone stole a valuable ring and wanted to sell it quickly, how long would they wait? Would they try to get rid of it immediately? Depends on their situation. If they're desperate for money, they might move fast. But if they're smart, they'd wait a few weeks, let things cool down, give the victim time to assume the item is truly lost before surfacing with it somewhere far from home. Somewhere far from home. My mind raced through the implications. Serena could drive to another city, another state even, and sell the ring where no one knew our family or would recognize Miguel's distinctive band. By the time I figured out what had happened, the ring would be gone forever, dispersed into the underground economy where stolen goods disappeared without a trace. There's something else, Carlos said quietly. The woman left something behind yesterday, probably dropped it when she was rushing out. He reached under the counter and produced a small silver earring, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I recognized it immediately. One of a pair Serena had bought last month with money she claimed came from an overtime bonus at the boutique. That's hers, I confirmed, my voice hollow. I figured as much. Expensive piece. Real silver, good craftsmanship. Your sister has expensive tastes. Expensive tastes funded by other people's generosity. How many times had I given her money for emergencies that had actually gone toward designer jewelry and clothes? How many sob stories about overdue bills had I believed while she built a wardrobe I couldn't afford on my grief counselor salary? I took the earring, feeling its weight in my palm. Physical evidence of Serena's presence at the pawn shop, proof that she'd lied about her whereabouts, proof that she'd attempted to sell stolen goods, proof that my suspicions were justified. Mr. Martinez, I said carefully, if I wanted to report this theft to the police, would you be willing to provide a statement about what happened yesterday? Absolutely. I keep detailed records of all interactions, and our security cameras captured the entire consultation. He pulled out a business card. Detective Clara Morales at the downtown precinct handles most theft cases involving stolen jewelry. She's a good person, fair, thorough, and doesn't let family connections interfere with justice. I pocketed the card, feeling like I was crossing a bridge that would burn behind me. Once I involved the police, there would be no going back to the way things were. No more pretending Serena's problems were just temporary setbacks that family love could solve. One more thing, Carlos said as I turned to leave. The ring your husband wore, it's custom-made, isn't it? Those infinity patterns, the specific width of the band, that's not something you'd find in any jewelry store.
Miguel had it made specially for our first anniversary. The infinity symbols represent eternal love. Then it's essentially one of a kind. If someone tries to sell it anywhere in the tri-state area, I'll hear about it through professional networks. Custom pieces like that are memorable. Any reputable appraiser would recognize it immediately. The knowledge was both comforting and terrifying. The ring's uniqueness made it traceable, but it also made Serena more likely to panic and sell it to criminals who wouldn't care about its distinctive features. I drove home through afternoon traffic, Carlos's business card burning in my purse beside Serena's silver earring. The evidence was mounting, each piece building an undeniable case against the sister I'd spent my life defending. My phone buzzed with another text. "Any luck? Getting worried about you. Want me to come over and help search?" The false concern in her message made my stomach turn. She was getting worried, all right, worried that I was getting closer to the truth, worried that her window for selling the ring was closing. I typed back, "Thanks, but I think I need some space to process this. We'll call you tomorrow." Her response was immediate. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Love you, sis." Love you, sis. The same words she'd used to manipulate me into countless loans, alibis, and second chances. The same phrase that had always preceded my capitulation to her needs, my enabling of her mistakes. This time it felt like a threat wrapped in false affection, a reminder of the family loyalty she expected, the silence she demanded, the protection she assumed was her birthright. But love wasn't theft. Love wasn't betrayal. Love wasn't stealing the last tangible piece of someone's deceased spouse and trying to sell it for cash. Whatever Serena felt for me, it wasn't love. And whatever I had felt for her wasn't worth protecting anymore. The time for family loyalty was over. The time for truth had begun. I couldn't bring myself to call Detective Morales that evening. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with Carlos's business card and Serena's silver earring, staring at the evidence like it might somehow rearrange itself into a different story. One where my sister hadn't betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable. The rational part of my mind knew I should involve the police immediately. But 30 years of sisterhood, of protecting Serena, covering for her, believing her promises to do better, created a wall between knowledge and action that I couldn't seem to breach. A soft knock at my back door interrupted my paralysis. Through the glass, I saw Marco Reyes holding a steaming cup of coffee and wearing his familiar expression of gentle concern. Marco had been my neighbor for 3 years, ever since his retirement from the security company where he'd worked for decades. He was the kind of man who noticed when your newspapers piled up, who salted your walkway after snowstorms without being asked, who had somehow appointed himself the unofficial guardian of our quiet street. "Saw your lights on late again," he said when I opened the door. "Thought you might need some company." I'd never been more grateful for his intuitive kindness. "Come in, please." He settled at my kitchen table, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee mug, and waited with the patient silence of someone who understood grief. Marco had lost his wife 2 years before Miguel's accident, and we'd developed a quiet friendship built on shared understanding of loss. "Something's troubling you," he observed. "More than usual." The whole story spilled out. The missing ring, Serena's lies, the pawn shop consultation, my growing certainty that my sister had stolen the most precious thing I owned. Marco listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or asking gentle, clarifying questions. "The timing bothers me," he said. "She showed up the morning after the ring disappeared, acting cheerful when she should have been concerned. That's not normal behavior. I keep hoping I'm wrong, that there's some other explanation." "But you don't believe there is?" I shook my head, tears threatening. "I want to, Marco. I want to believe my sister is capable of better. But all the evidence points to the same conclusion." He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. "Can I tell you something?" Something that might be difficult to hear? I nodded. I've been keeping an eye on the neighborhood since those break-ins last year. Installed security cameras, watch for unusual activity. It's become a bit of a habit. He paused, choosing his words carefully. 3 nights ago, I saw someone at your house very late, around 2 a.m. My blood chilled. Someone? A woman. Dark hair, slight build. She had a key, let herself in through the front door like she belonged there. I was inside for maybe 10 minutes, then left carrying something small. The room tilted around me. You saw this? Clear as day. My cameras have night vision, motion activation. I almost came over to check on you, but the person had a key, moved around like they were familiar with the house. I figured it was someone you'd given permission to be there. Did you... I could barely form the words. Did you record it? Marco nodded gravely. Everything's automatically saved to cloud storage. I can show you the footage if you think it would help. 10 minutes later, we were in his living room watching his security system play back on his large television screen. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m., 2 nights ago, the night before I discovered my ring was missing. The figure on screen was unmistakably Serena. She approached my front door with purposeful strides, inserted her key without hesitation, and disappeared inside. The exterior camera captured her clearly. Expensive jeans, designer jacket, the confident posture of someone who belonged there. There's more, Marco said quietly. Fast forwarding to 2:28 a.m. Serena emerged from the house, moving faster, more furtively. She paused at the front door, looking up and down the street as if checking for witnesses. Her right hand was clenched in a fist around something small. Even in the infrared recording, her body language screamed guilt. Hunched shoulders, quick movements, the careful stealth of someone who knew they were doing something wrong. Can you see what's in her hand? Not clearly, but given the size and the way she's protecting it, Marco paused the footage, zooming in on Serena's clenched fist. Could be a ring. I stared at the screen, watching my sister's grainy figure clutching what was almost certainly my husband's wedding ring. The sister who had looked me in the eye 12 hours later and asked if I had checked my car seats, who had suggested couch cushions and bathroom counters while knowing exactly where the ring was because she had taken it herself.
I'm sorry, Amelia, Marco said softly. I know this isn't what you wanted to find. It's exactly what I needed to find. My voice sounded strange, detached. It's proof. What will you do now? I thought of Detective Morales' business card upstairs, of Carlos Martinez waiting to give his statement, of Serena probably researching illegal pawn shops while texting me fake concern. The time for family loyalty and second chances had officially ended. I'm going to call the police. Marco nodded approvingly. I'll provide copies of the footage, testify if needed. What she did, violating your home, stealing something that precious, it's not just theft. It's a betrayal of everything family should mean. 30 years, I said, more to myself than to him. 30 years of bailing her out, covering for her, believing she'd change. And this is how she repays me? Some people don't change, Amelia. They just get better at hiding who they really are. I thought of all the times I'd made excuses for Serena, her impulsiveness, her bad judgment, her inability to accept responsibility for her actions. I'd told myself she was just immature, that she would outgrow her selfishness, that family love could transform her into someone worthy of trust. But people don't steal their sister's wedding ring and then lie about it because they're immature. They do it because they're capable of profound cruelty, because they valued their own immediate needs over their family's deepest pain. The woman on Marco's security footage wasn't my troubled little sister making another mistake. She was a thief, a liar, someone who had calculated the cost of her betrayal and decided Miguel's ring was worth destroying whatever trust remained between us. "She hasn't sold it yet," I said, thinking out loud. "Carlos said she left the pawn shop without completing a transaction. She's probably looking for somewhere less legitimate, but that takes time. Then there's still a chance to recover it. If I move fast enough." I stood up, sudden determination flooding through me. "Marco, can you send me copies of that footage tonight? I want to have everything ready when I call the detective in the morning." "Of course. And, Amelia, you're doing the right thing. I know it feels like betraying family, but she betrayed you first. She made this choice when she walked into your house and stole something she knew would devastate you." Walking home across our adjoining yards, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 5 years of grief. Righteous anger. Not the hollow sadness of loss, but the fierce energy of someone fighting to protect what mattered most. Serena had counted on my passivity, my loyalty, my unwillingness to believe the worst about family. She'd gambled that I would search forever, without ever considering the possibility that someone I loved could hurt me so deeply. She'd miscalculated. Badly. Tomorrow, Detective Morales would see the security footage, hear Carlos's testimony, examine the evidence of Serena's lies and theft. Tomorrow, my sister will learn that some betrayals have consequences that family love cannot shield her from. Miguel's ring was still out there, still recoverable, and I was going to get it back, even if it meant watching my sister face justice for the first time in her privileged life. The grieving widow who had absorbed everyone else's problems without fighting back was gone. In her place stood a woman who finally understood the difference between love and enabling, between family loyalty and self-destruction. Some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. Miguel's memory was one of them. The ring that symbolized our eternal love was another. And if Serena couldn't understand that, she was about to learn it in the harshest way possible. I didn't call Detective Morales. Instead, I called Serena. "Can you come over? We need to talk." Her voice brightened with false concern. "Of course. Did you find the ring?" "Just come over, Serena. Now." She arrived within 20 minutes, her usual confident smile faltering when she saw my expression. I'd printed Marco's security footage, 3 clear images of her entering my house, checking the street, and leaving with something clutched in her fist. "Sit down," I said, placing the photos on the coffee table between us. Serena glanced at the images and all color drained from her face. "Amelia, I can explain. 2:17 a.m., 3 nights ago, you used your key to enter my house while I was sleeping and stole Miguel's wedding ring from my bedroom." My voice was steady, surgical. "The same night you claimed you were out with Derek until late. It's not what it looks like."
Stop lying to me. I placed the pawn shop receipt next to the photos. Martinez Pawn and Jewelry. You tried to sell my husband's ring and got scared off when they explained their anti-theft procedures. Serena's hands shook as she reached for the evidence, her practiced composure crumbling. "You don't understand. I wasn't going to sell it permanently. I just needed $3,000? Carlos Martinez told me exactly what my ring is worth. I was going to buy it back." The words exploded out of her, desperate and shrill. "I have gambling debts, Amelia. Real ones this time. People who don't accept payment plans or sob stories. They gave me 2 weeks, and I'm already past the deadline." "So you stole the one thing you knew would destroy me?" "I thought you'd never notice. You barely leave the house except for work. I figured I could pawn it, pay off my debts, then claim I found it somewhere and return it before you ever knew it was gone." The casual cruelty of her reasoning hit me like a physical blow. She'd calculated my grief, measured my isolation, and decided she could exploit both for her own benefit. "You researched illegal pawned operations, Serena. You planned to impersonate me as a grieving widow selling my husband's jewelry." I pulled out her silver earring, the final piece of evidence. "You dropped this at Martina's pawn while planning to commit identity theft."
Serena stared at the earring, her last hope of denial evaporating. I never run through with it. The ring is still safe. Where is it? Hidden in my apartment. I swear to God, Amelia, I haven't sold it. When I realized how complicated legitimate pawn shops were, I got scared. I was trying to figure out what to do. You were researching illegal operations, places that don't ask questions about stolen goods. I was desperate. She fell to her knees beside my chair, tears streaming down her face. These people aren't patient, Amelia. They'll hurt me. They'll destroy my credit, maybe worse. I needed quick money, and your ring was the only valuable thing I had access to. It wasn't yours to access. It was sacred to me, and you violated that for gambling money. I know it was wrong, but you have to understand. I'm your sister. Family is supposed to help each other. You've always helped me before. Help you, yes. Enable your self-destruction, apparently, but I never gave you permission to steal from me, and I certainly never gave you permission to steal Miguel's memory. Serena grabbed my hands, her grip desperate. Please don't call the police. I'll return the ring right now, today. I'll get help for the gambling, go to therapy, whatever you want. Just don't destroy my life over this. I stared into her eyes. The same dark brown as our father's. The same eyes that had looked up at me with fake innocence countless times throughout our childhood. How many lies had those eyes told? How many manipulations had I fallen for because I wanted to believe my sister was better than her actions? Your life, Serena? What about mine? What about Miguel's memory? What about the trust you shattered when you snuck into my house like a common criminal? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I pulled my hands free, standing up. You made a choice. You chose your immediate comfort over my deepest pain. You chose gambling debts over family loyalty. You chose to betray me in the most personal way possible. Amelia, please, get the ring, now. We're going to the police station together, and you're going to confess what you did. I can't go to jail. You know I can't handle... You should have thought of that before you decided to steal from your grieving sister. The woman kneeling on my living room floor wasn't the sister I'd protected for 30 years. She was a stranger who had calculated my vulnerability and exploited it for cash. Someone who had turned my sacred grief into her personal ATM. I'm giving you one chance to do the right thing, I said quietly. We can walk into that police station together, with you taking responsibility for your actions, or I can call Detective Morales and let her arrest you. Your choice. Serena's face hardened, her tears drying as quickly as they'd appeared. You'd really do that? Destroy your own sister over a piece of jewelry? It's not just jewelry, and you know it. It's Miguel. It's our marriage. It's everything I have left of the man I loved. I reached for my phone. You have 10 minutes to decide. Ring and confession, or Detective Morales gets all the evidence I've collected. For the first time in our relationship, I held all the power, and Serena finally understood that her victim had learned to fight back.
Detective Clara Morales was exactly what I'd hoped for. Professional, empathetic, and utterly unimpressed by family drama. She reviewed Marco's security footage with the focused attention of someone who had seen every possible variation of human betrayal. Clear case of breaking and entering even with a key, she said, pausing the video on Serena's guilty exit. The fact that she had legitimate access doesn't matter once she used it to commit theft. Serena sat beside me in the interview room, her earlier defiance replaced by hollow resignation. She'd retrieved the ring from her apartment. Finding it wrapped in tissue paper inside a jewelry box felt like discovering a piece of my soul in a stranger's possession. Miss Cruz, Detective Morales addressed Serena directly, you understand you're confessing to felony theft. The ring's value puts this in serious criminal territory. I understand. Serena's voice was barely audible. I just want to make it right. Making it right would have been not stealing it in the first place. The detective's tone remained neutral, but carried an edge of disapproval. Walk me through what happened 3 nights ago. Serena's confession was thorough.
almost rehearsed. She detailed her gambling debts, her desperation, her calculated decision to target the ring during my most vulnerable hours. She admitted to researching pawn shops, to planning identity theft, to lying repeatedly when confronted. I knew it would hurt her, she said, glancing at me with something that might have been remorse. But I told myself it was temporary, that I could fix everything before she found out. But you didn't intend to return it, the detective observed. You researched illegal pawn operations after the legitimate shop wouldn't cooperate. I was scared. These people I owe money to, they're not patient. I thought if I could just buy time by permanently disposing of your sister's most treasured possession. Serena had no answer for that. The detective turned to me. Mrs. Cruz, what outcome are you seeking here? I'd thought about this question during our drive to the station. Part of me wanted Serena to face maximum consequences. Jail time, criminal record, the full weight of justice for her betrayal. But another part, the part that remembered 30 years of sisterhood, wanted rehabilitation more than punishment. I want accountability, I said finally. I want her to understand that actions have consequences, that she can't keep using family love as a shield for destructive behavior. The district attorney will review the case, but given the confession and evidence, Miss Cruz is looking at potential jail time. First offense, family relationship, she might plea bargain for probation and restitution. What kind of restitution? Depends on damages beyond the ring's value. Emotional distress, the cost of investigation, potential therapy needs. Could be substantial. Serena flinched. I don't have substantial money. That's why you committed a felony, Detective Morales finished. Miss Cruz, you'll be processed and released on your own recognizance pending formal charges. Stay in the city, maintain employment, and avoid contact with the victim unless approved by the court. As we signed paperwork, Serena made one final attempt at manipulation. Amelia, you know I never meant it for it to go this far. We can still handle this privately, as a family. No, I said simply. We can't. You forfeited the right to family consideration when you snuck into my bedroom at 2 a.m. Detective Morales walked us out separately. Mrs. Cruz, I know this is difficult. Prosecuting family members always is. But you did the right thing. Enabling destructive behavior isn't love. It's complicity. Driving home with Miguel's ring safely returned to my finger, I felt something I hadn't experienced since his death. Peace. Not the hollow absence of conflict, but the deep satisfaction of standing up for what mattered most. My phone buzzed with a text from Serena. This isn't over. Family is family. I deleted the message without responding. She was wrong. Family was supposed to be love, trust, protection, loyalty. What we'd had was something else. A dysfunctional arrangement where I absorbed her consequences while she avoided responsibility. That arrangement was officially terminated. Serena would face justice for her choices, and I would finally be free from the exhausting cycle of her crises and my enabling. The woman who had spent 5 years drowning in grief and 30 years cleaning up her sister's messes was gone. In her place stood someone who understood the difference between love and self-destruction, between family loyalty and personal dignity. Miguel's ring caught the afternoon light as I drove, its familiar weight on my finger, a reminder that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. 3 months later, I sat in a courtroom, watching my sister's defense attorney paint me as the villain in our story.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, gesturing toward me with theatrical sympathy, we have a woman consumed by grief, unable to move forward, who has weaponized the legal system against her own family over a tragic misunderstanding. Tragic misunderstanding. As if Serena had accidentally broken into my house and coincidentally left with my wedding ring. Miss Serena Cruz is not a criminal. She's a young woman who made a desperate mistake while trying to protect herself from dangerous creditors. She never intended permanent theft. She planned to return the ring within days. I watched Serena at the defendant's table, wearing a conservative navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She looked vulnerable, contrite, every inch the reformed sister who deserved another chance. It was a masterful performance. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Patricia Vega, dismantled the defense systematically. The defendant didn't borrow the ring, she told the jury. She stole it from her sleeping sister's bedroom at 2 a.m. She didn't ask for help with her financial problems. She researched illegal pawn operations to fence stolen goods. This wasn't desperation. It was calculated betrayal. When they called me to testify, I kept my voice steady, despite the emotional weight of the moment. The ring represents my marriage to my late husband, I explained, touching the band on my finger. It was custom-made, one of a kind, irreplaceable. Losing it felt like losing him all over again. How did you feel when you discovered your sister had taken it? Devastated, not just by theft, but by the violation of trust. She had watched me grieve for 5 years. She knew what that ring meant to me. Taking it was like stealing a piece of my husband's soul. Serena's attorney tried to rattle me during cross-examination. Mrs. Cruz, isn't it true that you've given your sister money dozens of times over the years? Yes, when she asked for help. This time, she didn't ask. She stole. Isn't it possible she was too ashamed to ask directly, given your history of judgment regarding her lifestyle? My sister has never been too ashamed to ask for money. She was too ashamed to admit she wanted to steal my dead husband's ring for gambling debts. The security footage was devastating. The jury watched Serena enter my house with a key, exit with something clutched in her fist, check for witnesses. Her body language screamed guilt, even in the infrared. Carlos Martinez testified about her nervous behavior, her questions about illegal pawn operations, the earrings she'd left behind while researching how to sell stolen jewelry. When Serena took the stand in her own defense, her attorney tried to humanize her struggle. I was terrified, she said, tears flowing on cue. These people I owed money to, they made threats. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just saw the ring sitting there and I thought I could borrow it temporarily. At 2 a.m, without permission, from your grieving sister's bedroom? I knew she'd say no if I asked, but I planned to return it before she ever knew it was gone. Except you researched permanent disposal through illegal channels? Serena's composure cracked. I got scared when the legitimate pawn shop wanted documentation. I panicked. I wasn't thinking straight. During closing arguments, her attorney made one final appeal. This is a family tragedy, not a criminal case. Serena Cruz made a mistake, but she deserves compassion, not incarceration. The prosecutor was unforgiving. The defendant calculated her sister's vulnerability and exploited it for personal gain. She violated the sanctity of grief, betrayed family trust, and showed no remorse until caught. This isn't a mistake, it's predatory behavior that demands accountability. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all charges. Serena's face crumpled as the verdict was read. She looked at me across the courtroom, her expression a mixture of disbelief and accusation, as if I had somehow betrayed her by refusing to enable her crime. The judge was firm during sentencing. Ms. Cruz, you violated your sister's home, stole her most precious possession, and planned to dispose of it permanently. Your victim impact statement shows the profound emotional damage you caused. This court sentences you to 18 months imprisonment with eligibility for parole after serving 6 months with good behavior. As bailiffs led Serena away, she turned back one final time.
I hope you're happy, she said, her voice carrying across the quiet courtroom. You destroyed your own sister over a piece of jewelry. No, I replied, loud enough for her to hear. You destroyed yourself. I just refuse to help you do it anymore. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Closure. Not the bittersweet resolution of grief, but the clean finality of justice served and truth acknowledged. Miguel's ring caught the afternoon sunlight as I descended the courthouse steps. its familiar weight a reminder that love, real love, was worth defending against anyone who would betray it, even family. 6 months later, I knelt beside Miguel's grave, his wedding ring warm against my palm as afternoon sunlight filtered through the cemetery's oak trees. "She's in prison," I whispered to his headstone. Serena finally faced consequences for her choices. The ring caught the light, infinity symbols gleaming like promises kept. For 5 years, I'd worn my grief like armor, protecting everyone else from the sharp edges of loss. But grief wasn't meant to be a shield for others' cruelty. Standing to leave, I slipped the ring back on my finger, where it belonged, not as a chain binding me to the past, but as a reminder that some loves transcend betrayal, some truths demand courage, and some battles are worth fighting. Miguel would have been proud. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.